Dana, I am excited to have you kick off the first episode of a long journey. I'm bringing sales professionals together to determine where we go from here. We live in a very interesting and turbulent age, and I just want to see if there's any missing opportunities within the work we do. So I've started Suede Motion, whose vision is to demystify lead generation, and within that, demystify business growth in general. And there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, a lot of variables of sales and outreach. And I'm excited to dive into your piece and see how you come to the full challenge of business growth in a unique way. So thanks again for coming on. Dana and I, we've known each other for a couple of years now, and both have a love for cold calling and setting up call center efforts. And I'm excited to hear more of your story. So you have a sales coaching firm called Sun. Sun is designed to help businesses understand their customer, understand how to close deals in a more unified way. And instead of asking you, why you started Sun or what Sun even is, I remember you told me a story. You have a very, very entrepreneurial daughter who asked you recently, what's the hardest part of your job? Kids ask the best questions. And I wanted to ask you, what is the hardest part of the work you do in helping businesses sell, scale, and grow? And how do you overcome that, Dana?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you got to let me say thank you, for being here today too. And as you noted, we go back a while. Actually, you may remember you were a pioneer with some of the podcasting that was going on, and I actually did a podcast with you a number of years ago. So I'm thrilled to be back.
Yes, I remember that.
And you had mentioned one thing too, and I'll talk about my daughter, and we could spend the entire time talking about her because she's got a lot going on. But the sales coaching piece is important, and it's really the sales coaching piece from the ownership perspective, from the owner or the founder seat. And I think, hopefully, some of my experiences have my own personal experiences as well as some of my professional experiences have lent itself to be able to speak to that. But yeah, so my daughter, it was actually just a week or so ago, she was asking me, Dad, what's the hardest part? Do you like what you do? And what's hard about it? And, I thought about it, and I didn't really think about it from a sales perspective, but it was from a change management perspective. And I think that when I started the company 12 plus years ago, I assumed everybody wanted to grow their business, and I think everybody does. The difference is that not everyone is willing to do something different in order to do so. And so that's something that I had to learn, and probably didn't learn it as quickly as I could have learned it. But the thing that I've worked on, and it's part of sales process, right? It's understanding the why. So not just professionally why, like, hey, we need to grow, we need to hit numbers, we need cash flow, but like, hey, why do you, Matthew, want to grow this business? Is there a personal motivation? Do you need to buy a bigger boat? Do you want to exit the business in 5 years? Do you want to raise money? So really understanding that why, and then once we can kind of lock in on that, we try to make it a math problem, and that's what it's about. I've never loved the thing about sales that it's a numbers game, but it is a number. There is a number, right? And to make those numbers count. So like, what's the opportunity, the revenue opportunity, the cost, and then the opportunity cost, which is where I think the magic really happens. So yeah. So that's what she and I talked about, and it was a great conversation.
No, that's incredible. And a lot of people don't think about that portion of running a business in general. If you're a consultant, you have a slew of best practices that can push forward an initiative, and people may hire you, but they realize they're going to have to change some of the things that have been ingrained in their everyday process. Right. And you don't realize how tough that can be to navigate the personalities and the emotions and all of that around change management. So appreciate you for covering that. And great question from the kiddo, huh?
Right. Yeah. And I love that you said emotion too, because
yes,
that's probably the biggest part of all of this, right? So
oh yeah, we're very emotional creatures, which can cause a lot of problems, right. But it's also what makes life fun and poetic. The next question I had for you was, take us back and tell us about sales in general. what is the sales function's purpose in a business?
What's the gas, right? It's the gasoline that makes everything else go. I think that as I've been working with business owners and through my work with startup founders and work with some of the economic development partners in the Midwest, I probably have talked to almost 1,000 different founders and owners over the last 10 years, 12 years, and they all have a different motivation. So we go back to the why that we just talked about a few minutes ago, but I think it's really getting everybody aligned around a single purpose. And you walk into a lot of companies and you'll hear on occasion people say, well, we're all in sales, and that's true, but what does that mean? And it means something different to everybody in the organization. So sales for me is not a one-time me to you transaction, but it's taking that one-to-one transaction, documenting that particular interaction in such a way that not only can I do it in a repeatable, scalable, forecastable way, but now I can teach somebody else to do that. And I can teach another person to do it. And I'm not dependent on me as the owner founder to be able to lead or be, so heavily involved in the sales function. I can do that in a forecastable way that creates value in the company. And then when we create value in the company, it benefits the entire organization. So again, I think that's, you're asking like, what's the function of sales? I mean, that for me, that's it. That's the value that it provides not only to the business, but to everybody there too.
Incredible. And you mentioned that you've worked with many owner-led or owner heavily involved sales organizations. What are some of the biggest mistakes business owners make when they think, I need to solve this sales problem?
Yeah, I think they feel like everybody's doing it the way that they would just do it. And I think one of the things that an owner and a founder, and I've been blessed. I mean, I spent a lot of time working with founders who were starting at the very beginning. They raised $5 or $10 million, and we need to take this new idea, this new solution to market. And so we're building from scratch. And there might be some best practices or right practices that we can pull in, but there's not an established way to do it. On the other end of the spectrum, where we have a company that's looking to exit, where the owners have been successful. They've had a 10, 15, $20 million company. It's been a good company for them, and they want to get to 30 or 40. They think they can just do more of what they've done. And they don't realize and connect the dots that once they bring on that first hire, it requires a different motion. Because you and I, Matthew, as the owner of our business today, if I decided I wanted to do something different because you presented an opportunity to me, I could do that. And then I would go tell the people that are executing, like, hey, we're gonna do this thing. We're gonna create this product. We're gonna deliver the solution. But I can't hire salespeople that can do that. I need to keep them in a lane. So I need to let them know exactly what it is we do, what it solves for, what's the value of that, how it lands in the marketplace, and again, how they can go do it in a repeatable, forecastable, scalable type of way. So I think that's the biggest misconception. We can't just do more of what the owner did. That's not it. So I would say that. And then one of the big challenges, I think, is that they just don't have visibility into what's going on. They may think there's activities happening, and they may mistake activity for outcomes, right? I think just helping them get their arms around that is super important. One other thing I'll add is my job is not to tell people that they're wrong about how they're approaching their business. I learned that a long time ago, that people don't want me to tell them, like, you're doing this wrong. But I think that if we can show them examples of where other people have had the same challenges and have been successful in navigating those challenges, I think that I think they appreciate having somebody sit in the seat beside them, to help them do that.
Yeah, your first sales hire cannot act and completely embody who you are as an owner.
Right.
And a lot of owners are like, hey, just shadow me, do what I do, how I do it. And it's literally impossible, because there's only a certain personality type and a certain person that can run your business. And usually that's just you.
Right.
So you need the systems, you need onboarding systems, you need visibility and the KPIs, and you need to be able to create that process, which kind of leads me to the next question, which is, what does it mean to build a sales organization to scale?
What does it mean? It means that I, as the owner, don't need to be involved in every deal that happens in order to make sure it gets across the line. It means me as an owner who is leading a sales organization or has a sales leader in place, that it means that I could lose somebody, and this company is still going to continue to run. That my business and my revenue is not dependent on the heroics of one rock star that I've hired away from somebody else, right? Because they're that good, somebody else is going to try to hire them away from you then, right? So so what we need to be able to do, we all want A players, and so we want to keep those A players, as best we can. And by the way, if you're not prepared as a sales organization, not only you can't attract those people because they know, because the good ones will ask you the questions and you better know the answer, because if you don't, they're going to walk away. And then on the flip side of that, the other challenge is you can't get rid of the ones that are underperforming, because you don't know what's happening in the organization and you feel as though you can't afford. So, solving a sales problem, I usually hear about a symptom. You'll hear about a symptom. I sent 8 proposals out and nobody's calling me back. Or, we didn't have any meetings last week. Those are symptoms of another problem, of a deeper problem. And I think, when you start seeing a couple of those things together, you start realizing there might be some gaps in the operating system, as far as the sales organization goes.
And to flip that, to get a slightly different answer, what are the warning signs that tell a business owner their sales organization isn't built to scale?
You can't launch a new product. You can't go into a new market. You think that solving a sales problem is about hiring more people. You think solving a sales problem is about just getting people to work harder, which usually it's not. In fact, you'll burn people out, and if they are good, they'll leave, and if they're not good, again, they can't go away. So those are probably some of the things that would be a flag to me. That's a challenge.
So when you say they can't launch a new product, so this business comes up with a new product line, they build something really cool, but it just falls flat on its face, and they can't sell anything, that's a warning sign that, hey, this operation you have here isn't really built to scale or to add anymore.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. No names, please. But I was talking to a company, about a month or two ago, and they've had a lot of success. They've been in business for over 20 years. It was an owner-led sales organization, and then the owner kind of leads the sales group, and has a couple players. By the way, define what salespeople means. Sometimes those roles are ill-defined, and I'm not hiring an account executive. What does that mean? But in any case, that's another question if you want to talk about that. But they had a successful business. They added technology to their business, which a lot of businesses do now, right? They were a professional services organization, and they realized that technology could help me go faster and maybe also help my clients go faster. And there's a there for them. They've been unable to. What he told me, and I hope he's not listening, but he told me I can literally look out my window across the river and see a number of high-rise buildings, and we're not doing business with any of them. And why is that? We've done other work with them. We've been a known entity in the region for a long time, but we're not. And he said to me, which was probably, if we're talking about ideal customer profile, this would be my ideal customer profile for me. He said, I don't know why they can't do it. And that's the kind of thing that keeps people up at night. That's the kind of thing that I can't sleep. That's the kind of thing that I don't go on vacation next month. That's the kind of thing that I'm not, present with my kids when I should be, because I'm worried about this other thing, right? So those are some of the things that I would think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, and I've been in business for quite a while, talked to many different business owners, and I have had this mindset, and also know other business owners have the mindset of, if we can just close 1 or 2 more deals, we'll be okay.
Right.
Or let's see how this quarter goes before we make any changes.
Right.
My question to you is, why is waiting usually the wrong strategy?
It's like physical fitness, right? If we look in the mirror one day and it's like, hey, I need to get to the gym. It didn't happen, overnight for me to get here, right? And it's not gonna be overnight that I solve this issue. I could go to the gym, have a really good day. I could do legs, have leg day today and feel really good about it, but it doesn't solve the problem, long term. And I think, so flip that into like a sales and a revenue perspective. Actually, a big sale or one big deal could be to the detriment of the company, because there's so much riding on getting that thing across the line that we focus so many resources and so much attention to it, then we start to bleed out the back end of our existing customer base and other prospective clients and other pipeline that we may have been paying attention to. And I think that kicking that can down the road only exacerbates the problem, and it only adds the amount of time and the complexity to fix that. So if you recognize there's a problem today, solve the problem today. Just because you don't feel it today because you've got that, you got cash flow now for 2 months, it still doesn't solve the problem.
Right. I like that. When you first walk into a company, what's something you always find that surprises leadership?
It surprises, and would you be saying it would surprise leadership? And something that I found within their organization, and working.
Yeah, like you walk into a company, you analyze the things that you analyze. What's something that you almost always find that surprises the leadership when you come back to them?
Salespeople don't know what to do. The salespeople literally don't know what to do. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing. They're doing what they're doing. They come to a weekly sales meeting. But it's just an update meeting. It's not really an accountability meeting, or it's not really a coaching meeting, which, by the way, those are two different functions, right? Coaching and accountability. But the people just don't really know what's expected. And that gets into the misalignment of the job description. What's an account manager really doing? Do they have responsibility for revenue? What's an account executive doing? Where should they be spending their time? Do they need to create top of funnel, or do they work with somebody, like Matthew, to create top of funnel opportunities? Those are the types of things that are shocking to the organization, and then just the lack of data. Because I'll start asking questions. How long did it take to get a deal across the line? I think that's a pretty standard question. I know how long it takes you to go from zero to close. I know, we should know. It changes, it varies, it's not perfect, but I can if I've got X number of dollars in the pipeline, I know how many deals I need to close, I know how many historically will close, and I know how long it takes. They've not thought about that. And I'll just say this: the founder didn't start the business to be the head of sales, yet here we are. Right? And if you're not prepared as the founder, and this is on the front end, if you're not prepared to be head of sales, then you shouldn't start a company. And I don't mean that like in a negative way. On the other hand, because you have been the head of sales and maybe you've been successful, it doesn't mean that you're a good sales manager, a good sales leader. Because the moment you hire your first person, and you talked about this a minute ago, but I'll go a little deeper on it. The moment you decide to hire your first salesperson, you've now become a recruiter, a trainer, a manager, a coach, and maybe HR, because you've got to let somebody go. So you've just taken, hey, I'm really good at sales, and I'll just go sell whatever I need to needing to acquire all these different skill sets. And by the way, you're not going to go hire or train on those today. You're just going to figure it out on the fly. And I think that's why it's important to have people that you can trust around you that have sat in those roles and done that before.
Yeah, that is so interesting. Salespeople don't know what to do. They're given updates, but there's no accountability. There's no structure. There's no process. There's no retroactive. It's just, hey, yeah, this deal, I talked to Sally. Seems like she wants to buy.
Right.
And that's it. That's so interesting, and probably so true for many organizations.
Yeah, and I'll add one other thing, if I may, to that. As we're speaking, it's also the alignment of the rest of the organization. The sales team is like too often it's like the black sheep of the family. It's sales is over there. It's like, if we've got to include sales, we will. Operations is doing its thing, and they feel like it's something that they can point to and touch and feel. Marketing is doing their thing. They can put up a really creative ad, new website, do some AEO, SEO work, whatever they're doing. But then sales is doing something differently. And the challenge is aligning those functions so we're all pulling in the same direction is super important. Sales is not an individual; it's an individual contributor role. People say, "Oh, you're an individual contributor. I'm carrying the bag. I'm doing it myself." But I'm not doing it myself because I need product, customer success, marketing, operations, to help support me too. And I think that's the ownership and leadership oftentimes assume that's happening, and where it's really not.
Yeah. Incredible. Well, if a business owner is listening today, and they could do one thing differently over the next 90 days to improve revenue, what would you tell them they should do?
I would define and document everything that has happened historically with deals that you've done. So think about the clients and customers that you have. Think about the ones that you've lost. What happened? How did you meet that person? Where were they at? Where were they at geographically, industry, whatever that ICP, that market is for you? How did that deal get done? And then recognize, are there is that a pattern? Is that how we normally get things done? Or was that a one-off? But document those things and get it in a Google Sheet, get it in a Word document, get it someplace. And then realize, are there gaps? Do we not really know what our competitors are doing? Do we really not understand what pricing model? So define, document, current sales processes, start to build some version 1 metrics and KPIs for us to go after and chase. And then we can start to iterate on those things, to figure out, are we on track? Can we be doing more? Should we be doing less? But unless we know where we're at, we'll never know where we're going to go. So I think those are the most important things that they could do. But think process, not people. Think process, not people. Because too often we think, well, it's a people problem. And usually if a number of these things are going on that you and I discussed here today, there's a process problem, and solve that first.
Incredible. Thanks for that. Well, my last question is, why you, Dana? What makes you different from other fractional sales personnel?
Yeah, I feel that's a great question, and I've had to think about that, right? And I thought about, I think that when I first got started, it was about sales. It was about how do we go sell more, go sell more faster, and teach other people to do it. Sitting in the seat that I've had the opportunity to sit in, working with like venture capital, PE firms, other economic development partners, where we're really talking about growth of the organization. We're not just talking about sales. So we're talking about things like talent and workforce development, funding. I think sitting in the owner seat, and I've probably, I think I mentioned a few minutes ago, I probably have talked to over 1,000 different owners and founders over the last 12, 14 years. I think sitting in their seat and thinking about not just sales, but thinking about growth, it's different. So tactically, there are some really good people out there that do sales. They do, fractional VP of sales leadership. They do sales training. Those are all great people. And quite frankly, those could all be partners of mine, because what my role is to take the pieces of the puzzle, put those puzzle pieces together, and then figure out what do we need to be successful. So I think having sat in the seat myself and working with owners and really having that lens is what makes it different.
Yeah. And it's important to have someone on your team that understands the full picture and understands what all the pieces even are. And that it seems like that's how you come into play, which is incredible. So thank you so much for joining. I really enjoyed the time we had together. Hopefully everyone listening got something out of this. I know I did. Appreciate it, and hope you have a great 4th of July weekend here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matthew, and thanks everybody. Stay safe and stay cool if you're listening to this before the 4th.